Chapter 18. Zach still felt a little weirded out by the fact that there had been a double murder at his church, especially since it had happened less than a week after he'd found out there were quite a few other racists at the church, during a meeting for one of their groups that he'd been invited to. He tried not to think about it as he and Serena got their kids out of the car and herded them inside, but the kids brought it up a couple times on the way over, making it hard to stop thinking about it. As he walked in, he noticed Joseph talking to Wesley and Galatea. He hadn't talked to any of them since the murders and was a little curious what they had to say about it. "I don't know what to think," Wesley said. "He didn't really seem like the kind of guy to do something like that, but I don't want to say it's impossible." "I didn't want to believe it at first either," Joseph replied, "but that's what it looks like right now." Zach asked, What looks like?" Joseph stuttered for a moment. Galatea replied, "We were just discussing the many theories about the murders." "Some people say Lucius killed that girl before being killed," Wesley said. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, especially when it's part of a series of weird, politically motivated murders." "I've been trying not to think too much about it," Zach said. "My mind just goes off on wild conspiracy theories when I do." "I know what you mean," Galatea replied. "Everything about this whole secret Hitler thing seems like a psyop." Zach said, "That's not what I mean." Joseph asked, "What do you mean, then?" Zach sighed, unsure of how much to explain. "Just some shit I heard. Someone was blaming Lucius for missing money a few weeks ago." He remembered the strange meeting Father Eli had with Joseph a couple weeks prior, and decided not to open up too much about his own theories about what was going on. When money's involved, you never know what people will do. "I heard that rumor too," Joseph said. "You think it was really him? Someone said he accused Father Eli of stealing it, but I don't know if that's true either." "I thought you were Eli's homeboy," Zach said. Joseph looked puzzled. "You think he could have something to do with what happened?" "It's certainly possible," Joseph replied. "He was acting a little weird a couple weeks ago." "I don't want to think Father Eli had anything to do with it," Galatea said. "The psyops are hitting too close to home." "Yeah, me either," Serena replied. "I don't want to think someone I know is a murderer, Eli or Lucius." "I want to know what happened, whoever it was," Zach said. He turned and saw that William and James had come in and were talking to each other. He nodded to them and they walked over. Joseph eyed James cautiously as the pair approached. James asked, "Hey, how's it going?" "Good," Zach replied. "We were just talking about the murders." "Yeah, who knew our church would be part of something so interesting?" James asked. "By the way, where were you when it happened? Thought you'd be at our Nova meeting, but I guess you had secret business to attend to." "Yeah, no," Zach chuckled a bit, even though he didn't like the insinuation that he was involved with the murders. "My kid had a soccer game." "We won 4-2, his daughter said. "Best game we've had all season." "Yeah, I'm glad I was there for it," Zach added, then looked at Serena. "Why don't you take the kids and find somewhere to sit? I'll join you in a bit." "Sure." Serena led the kids into the sanctuary, and Wesley and Galatea went with her. Zach asked James, "So what do you think happened?" "You mean, do I think Lucius killed that girl?" James asked. "Probably, yeah." Zach said, "I don't know, man. Seems like there's got to be something more to it than that." William added, "Yeah, even if he did, it's a little weird that Secret Hitler would have shown up and killed him right away. What do you think really happened?" "Follow the money," Zach said. "People say Lucius was stealing, but I don't think he was smart enough for all that. I think Eli or someone else might have set him up to take the fall, and things got out of hand." "Fucking Jesuits," James said. "I should have switched churches when we got him for a priest." William asked Zach, "You think Eli had something to do with it too, huh?" Zach asked, "Yeah, why? What makes you think that?" William replied, "Oh, I just meant James thinks Eli was involved too." James added, "Yeah, but I still think Lucius killed the girl, and that other girl from a couple years ago." Zach asked, "How do you figure that?" "Well, if Eli knew what Lucius did to the first girl and helped him cover it up, he could have started stealing knowing he could frame Lucius," James explained. "Then Eli tempted Lucius to do it again so he could kill Lucius and frame him for the theft and make it look like Secret Hitler did the murder." "Makes sense," Zach said. "I've always felt like something was off about Eli." William asked, "Why do you keep coming here then?" It's the closest Catholic church to me, and my kids have a lot of friends here, Zach answered. Besides, it's not the church's fault that the people working for it can't live up to their vows. Joseph said, I hate to admit it, but it seems like the church has been getting corrupted. Would be nice if we could expose Eli and at least get one corrupt a-hole out, Zach said, trying his best not to cuss in church despite wanting to. James asked, You think we could? Maybe, Zach replied. Find a way to look at the church's finances or his messages, whatever we can get our hands on, and see if we can prove anything. Joseph asked, Isn't that the police's job? You think the cops are going to do anything? Zach asked. I wouldn't count on it. William asked, So what do you want to do? Hack his computer? Zach replied, If I knew how. James said, He does have an office here, but he probably keeps his computer locked. William suggested, So if you got him to unlock his computer, then pulled him away from it, someone could copy his files and messages. Don't just blurt that out in front of Eli's homeboy, Zach said, gesturing at Joseph. Joseph said, Hey, if Eli had something to do with the murders, I want to find out just as much as the rest of you. Zach still wasn't sure Joseph could be trusted, but if the group of them were going to do something, he figured they should do it sooner rather than later. If we're going to do it, better do it today and hope he hasn't covered all his tracks yet. Ballsy, I like it, James replied. So how do we make it happen? Maybe me and Joseph can start fighting to drag him away from his computer while one of you grabs the files. Joseph made an uncomfortable face, but after thinking about it for a couple seconds, he said, That seems believable, actually. Joshua, Sophia, and Imani walked in, chatting with each other. They saw the group and walked over. Sophia asked, Hey, what are you all chatting about? Zach said, The shit that happened. Joseph added, And what we're going to do about it. Don't tell them that, James said a little loudly, causing a few bystanders to look over. This is why we're using you as the distraction, William commented, making Joseph and Zach laugh. The laughter seemed to calm the few bystanders who were watching, making them ignore the group again soon after. Imani asked, Can we help? Zach said, You don't even know what you're asking to help with. Imani asked, Whatever it is, I can trust you guys, right? Yeah, Joseph reassured her. So how do we get the priest to unlock his computer? William asked. Doesn't he usually do confession right after church? Joshua asked, Why do you need the priest to unlock his computer? Zach said, So we can take a look at his files and see who's been stealing money from the church. Someone's been stealing from the church? Joseph sounded surprised, but kept his voice down. Zach confirmed, That's the rumor. James added, And it sounds like it may be connected to the murders. Joshua said, I thought Secret Hitler killed those people. We don't think it's that simple, Zach replied. If we find proof, we can help the police find out who really killed that girl. If it looks like nothing was stolen and the rumors were wrong, at least we'll know. Sophia asked, So what's the plan? William explained. Get the priest to unlock his computer, then pull him away from it without locking it again. Then have someone sneak in there with a USB drive and steal any files or messages they can get. James and Joseph are going to fight each other to keep the priest distracted. I'm pretty good with computers and always keep a couple USB drives on me, so if you can buy me like 5 to 10 minutes, I can get a lot. Oh, you want to be the one stealing the files, huh? Zach asked. How do we know we can trust you to share them? How do I know you won't rat me out? William replied. Joseph knows me from Active Club and James knows the Patriot Front guys who know me. They can track me down if they have to. I can do it, Imani suggested. I work with computers all day at the clinic. James shook his head. I'd trust Will over you. Joseph said, I don't want to risk you getting in trouble over this. Not many people here know me aside from you all, William said. Less chance of someone knowing who to snitch on if they catch me. Zach reminded them. We still have to figure out how to get him to leave his computer unlocked. Sophia said, I was going to ask him if he needed someone to help with the choir until they find a new choir director. Zach replied, I didn't know you sang. Sophia explained, I'm not much of a singer, but I can play the piano and organ. James asked, How does that get him to unlock his computer? Sophia replied, I'll ask him if we can talk in his office, try to get him to unlock his computer, and if he does, I'll send one of you a message and let you know. William nodded. Sounds like a plan. You two sit separately so nobody suspects anything when you start fighting. We'll meet up after the service and make it happen." Zach asked, "You running this thing now?" William replied, "Hey, I'm the one taking the biggest risk here." James said, "You better not let us down." Zach added, "Yeah, you don't want to find out what I'm capable of if you fuck us over on this." William held his hands up defensively. "I won't. Don't worry. Once I get the files, I'll let James know where to meet me, and you can all come help me go through them." Zach nodded. "All right, sounds like a plan." He turned and went into the sanctuary to find his wife and kids, with Joshua and Sophia following him as Joseph and Imani sat together in the back and James and William sat together further towards the front. The service was nothing special. Zach had been to hundreds of services like it since he was a kid. He still believed, and he tried to let the chanting and singing get him into a spiritual mood, but his mind was too preoccupied by what would be happening after the service. When Zach took communion, he avoided eye contact with Father Eli, and taking communion from him made him feel a little sick. How had such a corrupt man been allowed to become a priest? He had never liked Eli, and over the past few years he had gotten angrier and angrier about the corruption of the Catholic Church from the top down, but he wasn't going to let some crooked priest chase him out of his church. Father Eli read from Matthew 26, where Jesus was betrayed by Judas and arrested. When he reached the part where Simon Peter cut off the priest's ear, Zach thought to himself that he'd love to cut off Eli's ear, as the priest continued the reading, saying, "Put back your sword into its place, for all who take the sword shall die by the sword." Zach couldn't help but think that Eli had chosen that verse specifically to convince anyone in the congregation that was on to him not to strike him down for what he'd done. He wanted to get up and punch Eli's lights out, to strangle him and force him to confess to his crimes. He knew better, and reassured himself that William would find enough evidence to go after Eli for something, at least enough to prove him guilty of stealing the church's money, and hopefully enough to connect him to the murders. When the reading was complete, Eli began his sermon. "As all of you know by now, this church was the scene of 2 grisly murders just over a week ago. Our choir director, Lucius Davis, was found tied to the very crucifix that hangs before you, with crimes burned into his flesh. Lucius was here that day to offer a private music lesson to Jessica Stone, a beautiful young lady with a lovely voice who brought joy to everyone she met. They touched the lives of everyone at this church, and many of you are just as devastated by these murders as I was. What's more, Lucius had 3 words burned into his body: fraud, theft, and murder. Considering the circumstances, some people have rushed to judgment and declared Lucius guilty of Jessica's killing, despite the fact that the police have not come to a definitive conclusion about the identity of her murderer. I don't know what happened here on that horrible day. I knew both the victims, and had spoken to each of them many times over the last few years. Lucius was a friend who I worked with closely, and I never once in all those years suspected that he could be capable of committing murder. The idea itself was shocking to me, as I'm sure it was to many of you. Jessica's parents trusted her in Lucius's care, as they had done many times before, as many of you had done before, and she had never accused him of any improper behavior. Are we to tarnish his memory over a word burned into his flesh by an actual murderer? None of us knows the identity of the serial killer who has been killing people of color and writing accusations of their crimes into their flesh. The killer hides behind anonymity while committing the most gruesome crimes. For all we know, the murderer, who many believe is associated with the secret Hitler hate group that has been spreading propaganda around town every time this serial killer commits a murder, that murderer may very well have killed Jessica to frame Lucius in order to justify his sick, twisted killing spree. It is not our place to judge the living or the dead. That belongs to God the Father and Jesus his Son. Those who live by the sword will die by it, and this secret Hitler killer will surely face judgment for the murders he has committed. If he killed Jessica, he will be judged harshly by God for that too. If Lucius killed Jessica, which I do not want to believe, but there is a chance, if Lucius killed Jessica, then let God judge his soul, not us. Do not sully your memory of Lucius and Jessica with hate, with anger, with thoughts of vengeance. Remember Jessica for her beautiful smile, for the joy and energy she brought into every room she walked into. Remember Lucius for his service to our church, for enriching the lives of our children, for the beautiful music he used to glorify God. If Jesus was able to face death without hate in his heart for those who killed him, if he was able to forgive and show mercy to those who wronged him, then we too must love even our enemies, even those who take what is most precious from us. Let those who live in hate stand before God and be judged for their hate. Let those who commit violence stand before God and be judged for their actions. But as for us, love. Let us share the love of Christ with one another as Jessica and Lucius did every day. Let us remember them for the love they gave. Please, take the hands of those next to you, whoever they may be, and join me in prayer. Zach reluctantly took Serena's hand and the hand of another member of the congregation. He closed his eyes and bowed his head as if to pray, but on the inside he was too angry with Eli to pray along with him as he spoke. Heavenly Father, please accept the souls of Jessica Stone and Lucius Davis into your loving embrace. We leave the punishment of the guilty in your hands, O Lord. Please help us follow Christ's example and forgive those who trespass against us, that we may be forgiven our trespasses. You are the righteous judge who holds our souls in your hands. We pray that you guide us to the path of love and forgiveness that your Son died to guide us down. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Zach only half paid attention as the service moved on and eventually concluded. As people started to get up and talk to one another, Zach looked to Sophia. When you get him to unlock his computer, send me a text. I'll make sure everyone's in position and ready to go. Sophia asked, "Gonna put that military precision to use?" Zach replied, "Assuming I can count on these half-wits to do their jobs, yeah." "Good luck. We believe in you," Sophia said, squeezing Joshua's hand as she looked at Zach. She got up to find Eli and get him to join her in his office. Serena asked, "What's going on?" "Getting to the bottom of what's going on," Zach replied. "Trust me, and if James and Joseph start fighting, don't try to break it up like you usually do when people fight." Serena's eyes went a little wide, but Zach gave her a kiss on the hand before getting up to find James, Joseph, and William. James and Joseph were still sitting together in one of the pews talking. William asked, "Are we ready to get this started?" "Sophia's talking to Eli." Zach looked around and saw that they were still in the sanctuary, but Eli looked quite happy with whatever Sophia was telling him. "Keep an eye on them and be ready to move when they come out. You know where his office is?" William replied, "Not exactly. I'll watch where they go." "From the narthex, where you come in," Zach explained. "You know how to the left you have the bathrooms and confessionals, and to the right there's that hallway with the meeting rooms and kitchen. Go down that hallway and around the corner. Eli's office is the last one on the right." William confirmed. "To the right as you come in, down the hall around the corner, and last one on the right. Got it." He turned to watch the priest as Eli and Sophia walked through the sanctuary towards the narthex. "Looks like they're on their way now. How much time do you think you can buy me?" "Hopefully at least 10 minutes. What's your number?" Zach asked. "I'll text you when he's on his way back." "Yeah, Joseph and I should be able to keep him busy for that long," James said, looking around for Joseph. "Looks like he's talking to that black girl again. Is he really one of us?" "Hell if I know," Zach replied. "She seems more racist than him, to be honest." William laughed while James shook his head. James commented, "Kinda like your friend Josh." Zach responded, "Yeah, Josh is almost as bad at being pro-white as your buddy Mike Enoch with his Jew wife." James said defensively, "Hey, they divorced." "Yeah, after she'd been on his show a bunch of times," Zach replied. "Look, shit's all fucked right now. I don't even care that you're following a guy who was married to a Jew, even if I don't trust him. If Joseph hasn't learned his lesson about the blacks yet, hopefully hanging out with that black girl makes him more racist one way or another. Sometimes you gotta play with the hand you were dealt, not the hand you want." "I hear that," William replied. "I'm gonna go wait in the narthex and try not to look too suspicious in the process." "Yeah, you do that," Zach replied. "Let me check on Joseph and make sure he's ready. I'll send him over to start shit when the time comes." "Sounds good." James walked off to talk with Joshua while William went to the front of the church. As Zach approached Joseph, he asked, "Is it time?" "Sophia's in his office, but she hasn't texted me yet." Zach replied and pulled out his phone to double-check. Imani asked, "You really think Eli had something to do with what happened?" Zach replied, "The more I hear about what's going on around here, the more it sounds like he's been up to some... Damn, that was fast. You ready to start some shit?" "Let's do this." Joseph stood up and Imani followed him over to where James and Josh were standing. Zach watched from a bit of a distance as the two of them steadily raised their voices, shouting insults at each other before Joseph shoved James, knocking him back against one of the pews. James came back swinging. The fight looked very amateur to Zach, but that probably made it more believable to the people watching. With the fight started, Zach loudly said, "I'll go get the priest to break this up," and rushed out of the sanctuary. William was standing in the narthex looking at his phone, and Zach tried to avoid looking at him as he hurried down the hallway towards Eli's office. He didn't bother to knock, just opened the door and walked in. "Those idiots James and Joseph started fighting in the sanctuary. Come on!" Eli looked surprised. "What? A fight? He looked at Sophia. "Let's go, we can talk later." Sophia stood up and motioned to Eli to let him leave the room first. Zach held the door as Eli stood up and rushed out the door with Zach and Sophia following him. As they walked quickly behind him through the narthex, William looked up from his phone, watching them pass before strolling calmly down the hallway, trying not to attract any notice as people's attention was turned towards the three people quickly moving into the sanctuary and the growing noise within. A small crowd had gathered around, watching James and Joseph as they swung wildly at each other, missing more swings than they landed, mostly hitting each other's arms. A few people were shouting, "Stop!" But with Joshua, Imani, and Serena standing there watching, the rest of the onlookers seemed to have decided to follow their lead and not step in to break up the fight. "What in the fires of hell is going on here?" Eli demanded as the crowd moved to let him through. "Hasn't there been enough violence in this church for one lifetime? You boys should be ashamed of yourselves." James shouted, "He started it!" Joseph shouted back, "You started talking shit first." Eli shouted at them both, "I don't care who started it. Do you think Jessica's family wants to see people taking swings at each other at our first mass after their daughter died? You think the people of our congregation haven't suffered enough this past week? Think about how your actions are affecting others, not just the two of you." Zach watched as the boys went quiet. He knew they needed to buy more time, and so did they. They looked at each other, and Zach's mind raced, trying to come up with something to say to keep the priest occupied. Imani came up with something first. "Maybe if James hadn't been talking shit about Lucius and dishonoring the dead, Joey wouldn't have had to tell him off." James replied, "I was telling the truth. Lucius did rob me." Joshua spoke up. He was really bad with money. Eli shook his head. "He's dead! What does that matter?" Something about the way he said it made Serena look at him funny, and it sounded to Zach like Eli was almost happy that people were accusing Lucius of theft. Sophia said, "I think we've all heard the rumors about him, but he's dead now. What does it matter if he made some mistakes in life?" "Thank you, Sophia," Eli said. "Look, James, I know you and Lucius had your problems in the past. I know tensions are high, and maybe you felt the need to let some of that out. But is it really worth starting a fight over? Sinning in a church by striking your fellow Christian? Really?" James repeated, "He pushed me first." Joshua confirmed. "Joseph put his hands on James first, yeah." Joseph managed to look and sound angry. "You shouldn't insult the dead." Eli put his hand up. "Joseph, your anger isn't making things any better. I understand where you're coming from. I really do. And James, I wish you had listened more closely to my sermon today. But Joseph, you're not living up to Christ's example by starting a fight over words." Zach suggested, "Maybe you should sit them both down and give them a good talking to." If it would keep the priest busy for a few more minutes, hopefully it would buy William enough time to find whatever he needed to find on Eli's computer. Eli nodded. "Perhaps I should. James, Joseph, have a seat, both of you." James and Joseph looked angrily at each other. They both stood there for a moment, breathing heavily through their noses, looking like they wanted to throw a few more punches first. Zach wasn't sure how much of it was acting and how much of it was actual anger with each other, but they were convincing. "Boys, sit!" Eli sounded much more stern, and the two of them looked away from each other and very slowly took their seats. Neither of them looked up at Eli or at each other. Joseph stared at the floor and started to look guilty while James stared off away from everyone and still looked mad. Eli sighed and looked down at the two of them. The crowd was starting to disperse, but a few people were still sticking around to watch and see how Eli would handle things. "Look, I know you're both upset by what happened. 2 murders in your own church. It's a lot to deal with. It's been difficult for me too, believe me. It's been difficult for their families too. It's been difficult for a lot of people. James, maybe you feel like you had some unfinished business with Lucius after that time a few years ago when you got mad at him over money. You're not the only person I've heard those kinds of complaints from. Perhaps there was more going on here under my nose than I realized, but Joseph isn't responsible for that, so don't take it out on him. Joseph, I know you're hurting because of what happened. I don't want to believe Lucius was capable of what people are saying he did to Jessica either. We still don't know whether he was responsible for it or not. Maybe hearing James accuse him of theft or fraud makes you think he's trying to justify Lucius being murdered, or accuse Lucius of having killed Jessica. I don't think that's what he's trying to do. Eli gave James a stern look, and James avoided looking him in the eyes. Zach looked at his phone. It had barely been 5 minutes, but Eli seemed like he was almost done talking to them. He wanted to buy some more time for William. Maybe you should take each of them to confession, have them do an act of contrition. Sophia added, I can wait. Do what you need to do to deal with these two. Eli looked at Sophia and seemed to be considering his options as he looked back at the boys. That's not a bad idea. James, would you like to join me for confession first? James sighed. Okay. Joseph also sighed, but as he stood up, he faced James. Before we go to confession, I should apologize to you first. I got carried away there for a minute. Sorry for picking a fight with you. James nodded and offered him a handshake. Sorry for provoking you. I should have been more careful about what I said. The two of them shook hands. Eli smiled. Well, perhaps confession can wait, if you two are all done. No, James shook his head. I think I should do confession. Yeah, Joseph agreed. I don't mind staying for it. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief as the group started walking towards the narthex. Zach figured doing confession for both of them would buy William at least another 5 minutes, probably a lot more than that. Once Eli was in the confession booth with James, he checked his phone again. It had been 8 minutes. William was probably trying to rush things, so Zach pulled out his phone to send him a text and let him know he'd have a little more time, but before he could send it, he noticed William coming down the hallway and talking to one of the Hispanic men who regularly came to their church. Zach couldn't remember his name, but he wondered if something was up. William seemed to be speaking softly and motioning to the man to keep things quiet as they walked out of the building together. Zach rewrote the text to ask William to let them know when they could get together to review whatever he had been able to get from Eli's computer.